See, that's what we're doing, Paige. Going for the daydream.
If you're an adult amateur horse lover who wonders what it takes to make magic with horses, you're in the right place. I'm Paige Lockton, and this is the magic of Horsecraft. Join me for conversations with wizards in the world of Horsecraft about the ingredients needed to build connection with horses and courage in life. Turns out these things are connected. How do I know? Like most things, I learned the hard way. I lost the magic I once had with horses. In regaining it, I discovered that the elements of connection are learnable. Whether you ride your horses forwards, backwards, or sideways, stick around for stories that show us how we are the same and that anything is possible. Take a chance. When I met my friend Gemini in June of 1988 at our A-level pony club testing, we had no way of knowing how our paths would criss and cross over the decades. We had no idea that we were forging lifelong friendships, nor that our friendships would be forged over the intimate knowledge of what it's like to have the legs knocked out from under you and your whole world crumble as you feel the lifeblood and gray matter of your most beloved slip through your fingers and disappear into a liminal space where once your whole universe shone as bright and real as the day. How could we know? How could we know that our respective destinies would be sealed by the near fatal blow of a young horse's hoof, or what it would be like to carry the impossible weight of responsibility for it in our hearts? How could we know the hours we would spend bedside, praying for them to be delivered through the impossible, to survive the un-survivable, and for the love of God and all things holy to stay for us who couldn't bear to let them go? No, they had to live. We needed them to. But how could we know what it would take for those two brave and generous souls to comply to our wishes, remain in this timeline, and stay? We couldn't, of course. It would have been easier to pass on to the next life, truly, and that's what virtually all of the medical experts expected. But they didn't know Miles and Mike, and they didn't know Gemini. At the time we met, we didn't know that one would need the other to be delivered from the slow-moving bullet that is guilt for our inability to prevent the inevitable. Nor that over 25 years after our respective train wrecks, we would don tiaras and stay up all night telling stories on an ancient porch in the Hockley Hills, sleep under the stars, and find a peace we had hitherto never known. We didn't know we would feel like twins, despite what a looking glass might say, as each mirrored the effects of the other's blows to head and heart. How could we? We were just kids. When we met, I had a sense of being on my way somewhere else, to be honest. I didn't know how pivotal our friendship would be. This was my second time contesting my Pony Club A-level, and I was on my way to bigger things. Mike, Jem, and Geraldine Peace were all contesting it for the first time. They were old friends who'd grown up through the Pony Club. None of us expected that 7 years later, Geraldine would be in the delivery room to coach me through with our shared best friend Mike, freshly out of 6 months of intensive neurorehabilitation, couldn't. In those 7 years, Mike became my best friend. I cried on his shoulder about a long-distance boyfriend I had. I stayed over at his house. He was someone I felt safe with. We celebrated New Year's 1989 together, and years later, emboldened by alcohol, my best friend finally ventured to kiss me. And that changed everything. I was going to marry my best friend. Just weeks before our wedding, newly pregnant, the world by the short and curlies, my whole world was sent spinning by the careless blow of a young horse's hoof. 6 years later, the blow of another hoof sent Jem's world crashing down around her as she, also newly pregnant, lifted the limp body of her 3.5-year-old son Miles and willed him, for the love of all things holy, to live. To live, in spite of what she felt, as one hand slipped into the space the back of his head once occupied and her world once solid, liquefied. Listen on as we pick up the pieces after spending 10 days with her family all these years later, and we dream of better ways and better days with horses and live out our purpose in life.
You make me feel like dancing. Wanna dance the night away. You make me
I've got some instruments. Hang on. Keep dancing.
You make me feel dancing. Oh, you got the tambourine.
Got the tambourine foot.
Oh God, that is
I
cool.
love
You
the
can put it on your
tambourine
wrist, too.
foot.
That is really cool. I think everyone needs a tambourine
Yeah,
foot.
all I really want to do is dance and hang out with my friends, and then it
Me
allows
too.
me to play percussion.
Oh, this is an awesome song. Listen to the words.
when you can be
Living your daydream. Sleep
When you can be living your daydream. See, that's what we're doing, Paige. Going for the daydream.
Even the dog settled down. That's nice.
They hear this song a lot.
Nice.
Okay, now what are we doing? Can we turn this
Awesome.
off?
Yeah, for a little bit. That was perfect.
Isn't that a great song?
And the perfect message. So I'm sitting outside in the sunshine, or we are, underneath an antique-ish cabin in that it was made from the boards of a barn from what era, Gemini?
1870.
1870, and Gemini lovingly turned it into something that just feels like a loving embrace when you walk into it from some other era. And it's full of, it's like every picture has a story. Every bit of her land around her tells a story. She's drawn to beauty. She grows flowers out of cracks in the wall. Her name is Gemini, of course. And I've known her since we were 18. And we met through Pony Club A testing with our best friends who Gemini, well, they were new to me. So Gemini's best friends for a long time, Geraldine Peace, Mike St. Denis, and Fiona.
I forgot about Fiona.
What's Fiona's last name?
What is Fiona's last name? It's probably different now.
Yeah.
What was Fiona's name?
That'll come to us later.
She was good friends with Mike.
Yeah. So
I wasn't in the same pony club, but she was.
Yeah. And I used to come down to this area from North Bay as a guest of David Godson's to Caledon Pony Club staff. So I knew some kids from down here, but I hadn't known you guys before. And we did our Pony Club A testing and then would see each other through the Young Riders programs through the Captain Mark Phillips Young Rider Development Series.
Whatever happened to that?
In 80...
Blah, blah. 7 or 8.
8, 9.
88.
Yeah.
89, I graduated high school, so.
89, I went on that one time only, going to be yearly scholarship
Yeah.
to train with him. That was ridiculous. That was amazing. But
I didn't go. I was never going to go, but
you
sounded
showed up
fun.
on a 15-1 hand?
yeah, 15-1. He was 15-1 on a tall day. I think he was 15 hands probably.
Yeah.
I'm like 5'3" though, so it wasn't that big a deal.
He'd jump whatever you pointed him at. And
He
he'd
wasn't a
point him at
natural
anything.
jumper. He would jump whatever you pointed him
Yeah.
at.
So you were the most fearless rider I ever saw or heard about on a horse. There's lots of
That's
life.
why I have a replaced shoulder.
There's 30 years since, I don't know how many years that adds up to between then and now, where our paths really didn't cross, and it was pre-internet where we could look up on the Facebook what each other was
But they
doing.
did on another level with Miles and Mike.
Yeah. So that was Mike's injury. I met my best friend, my new best friend,
with Gemini, and then I used to cry for years on his shoulder about someone that was like an artist that I really loved, pined for. And
As
I used
we
to
do.
have fun with Mike, and I just thought he was gay because he was respectful, I think. Maybe that was it. And flamboyant, and he didn't care.
And he was comfortable being a friend of girls, for sure.
Yeah, which is an important theme in life in general and other work that I do. And
Well, for me, I always preferred guys to girls as friends, and I didn't want to sleep with him, and he didn't care, so that was cool.
Yeah.
We were just friends.
Yeah, he was super guileless. I noticed something in his gaze that I see in your son Miles's gaze. So for those who don't know, my best friend, I ended up kissing me one day, years into the relationship, because he worked up the nerve and he was single at the time. And
He was always single. He had some girlfriend.
Miriam.
I
used
never
to
met
say
her.
Miriam.
I never met her.
Yum. No one did.
Yeah. Did she exist? That's what we all wondered.
She
right?
did. She was another pony clubber from Eastern Ontario or something.
I don't know.
Miriam, yum. We used to say, how's Miriam? Yum, Mike. So he kissed me one night in a tent at Fair Hill, and I was like, what? This is on the menu? This was always on the menu? I didn't know this was on the menu, and it changed everything because I wouldn't have acted the way I acted. I wouldn't have showed up dirty and stinky, not having washed my hair with it standing up in the air and acted like a maniac in my
Yes, you would.
overalls, right? Not if I thought I was flirting with him,
Okay.
maybe.
Maybe not.
Is that not how you
Not
remember
sure I
me?
believe you on that one.
Do you think I could have a filter? I might have had the sex kitten filter on for him, and I never had that one on
Did you
for
have duct
him.
tape on your mouth?
Or the rest around my wrists? No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was head injured just as we were kind of getting off the ground as a couple, and pregnant. I was pregnant. No one knew yet. And everyone was in Ontario that I loved. You were all invited to the wedding that was going to be on our front lawn at the Von Teichmans.
And I was so happy for them. It made so much sense. Mike was such a great guy.
He was. And he had this beautiful, guileless eye contact.
And he was funny. Oh my God, was he funny? So funny.
And is a ridiculous, he's just a complete anomaly. I was recapping with Gemini, having not seen her for eons, about my experience and Mike's experience through recovery from something not even remotely likely for any human beings to survive, let alone thrive and find beautiful, purposeful, soulful lives on the other side of. But like totally the odds weren't even, just ridiculous, eh? What we saw people survive through. So Gemini's son, when he was under
6 years
4 years
later,
old,
at
he was
the age
how
of
old?
3.5,
Was?
had an identical injury, kicked in the head by a broodmare. And I thought, and I went to the hospital when Mike was in the hospital, and he sort of remembered me with some prompting. And it was hard, and I wasn't directly involved, so I didn't go very many times. But then after Miles, I did seek out Mike and his mother to see what to do. Unfortunately, we never reconnected then.
I was
it would
up
have been
north,
good.
and I was in a relationship that probably didn't allow for that, and any look back into the horse world.
So I think what we're saying here, though, is that we've both been through a similar trauma in slightly different ways. It was her fiance, it was my son, but both with equal emotional impact, I think, or investment in that relationship. So we do share that, and it's funny that we've waited so long to compare notes, because I think that was really important for both of us. To do that. It was for me.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And maybe it was
there's not
timely.
very many people that share the breadth of our
there's nobody else that I could get together and discuss that and have them truly understand what you went through.
Yeah, I tried to look at it as a mother to a child and was gutted even more. My experience was someone that I knew and loved and needed because I was pregnant, and he was my world. He's my best friend. But you were also mother to a child, and there was honestly a layer of gutting there that...
I was a single mother to a child that I raised on my own from birth, too. So that was hard, but you get through it. I mean, everybody gets through it. Different people, obviously.
Yeah, so that's the PSA today. And if we stopped right here and said, hey, you know what? It doesn't last forever. And right now we're looking at...
And if you saw what we were wearing,
pool.
what we're dancing to, you would realize it gets better.
Yeah.
And Miles and Mike are happy people now.
and contributing. I looked into Miles's eyes and I saw such kindness, and
I always say it, he's the nicest person I know.
he was so thoughtful. He brought Gem home
Bought
a
me
book.
I tried reading it last night.
And he just saw it and saw a moment where he could connect and do something nice for someone. And every time he sees me, he asks me something about my life and my likes or dislikes, and kind of compares notes
remember,
with
too.
his experience. And you have this experience of being seen and heard, and that's one of the many synchronicities Gemini have found. And we keep finding things, and it's like we're same DNA, different bodies,
Different
parallel
bodies.
universes. Like, whoa, that was part of your universe and your upbringing too. And yet our upbringings were also totally different. But the commonalities the synchronicities are just ludicrous and kind of fun. So one thing I've been asking Gem a lot about is to talk to us about, so Gem has started thousands, I'll let you guys do the math. Gem had a how many stall barn?
65.
65 stall barn for how many years?
19.
And how many programs did you run through? How do we do the math on the horses?
For the first probably 12 years, we were full year round. But September, after the yearling sales, people would send us their horses to break, and some of them would stay the winter and start training in the spring. Some of them would go home to their own farms. So on average, we'd break 40 to 60 horses a year, yearlings.
Wow.
On top of the race horses we were training. But we weren't trainers. We weren't licensed trainers at Woodbine, so trainers would send us their babies, their horses, for layups, for turnout, for breaking, anything. And for training in the winter.
Even horse people may not understand what the lived experience is like of a human being that shapes the lives of young thoroughbreds from the time they're yearlings to ready to go to race. And no one could understand it any more than someone that has, however that many number adds up to, some math genius can tell us just from that discussion. On average, how many horses Gem has influenced, plus there's been a number outside of, it was Pine Valley, right? Mm-hmm. And one of them is just the most gorgeous story that went on to win at the Kentucky Derby. And I've heard her tell so many stories where she's just like, oh my God, when that horse was young and it came to me, and so invested in their future. And these are horses that have had good, productive careers. Some of them land back with Gemini, and were we instantly blessed with that pool full of cash tomorrow, they would probably all land here.
Not all.
And so she starts horses with the end goal in mind being one, you have a job to do, your job, young racehorse, and I promise you, they come understanding this. We're going to discuss this a bit, is to have a job and a future, right? And so we talked about what that might look like and what an ideal trip through the racehorse industry looks like. And Gemini knows what it looks like. So in a very polarized world right now that can be completely anti-horse sport, I am searching out the people that have had lived positive experiences in it and then asking them all kinds of questions about what that looked like with horses. So for Gem, I wanted to boil it down to something that we co-create. So as a little backstory too, I brought her with me to some substitute teaching I was doing for a friend who, like so many of you if you are in the horse industry, needed a break. And it's pretty hard to hand the reins over to someone and take a break if you run a horse business. So I was substitute teaching for a good friend, and we're co-friends with Gemini. And Gemini came to watch, and I was doing something outside of my comfort zone that I know is important to teach kids. And without missing a beat, Gemini stepped in and played to her strengths. Initially going, oops, I shouldn't have stepped in. But honestly, Gem, how many horses have you long-lined?
Thousands.
Thousands and thousands of horses she has long-lined. I have not. I've done a handful. And I know what I wanted to accomplish with this kid. And I'd given her some restrictions, pony club restrictions. Thou shalt not allow lines to touch the ground, kind of, or you fail thy pony club test rules. And Gem went, do you want to see what this looks like in the real world?
Toss the lines.
Can I take the reins? And it was beautiful. So what if you had, I like to call the beautiful people in the horse world that were unfortunately not blessed to be born in the horse world muggles. I'm not allowed to use that word though, because it's, I'll probably have to beep it out.
You
It's
might go to jail on
proprietary.
Facebook.
Yeah, I'll go to jail now because my course used to be called From Muggle to Magician, Making Magic with Horses.
Funny.
What do the Muggles need to know that so desperately want to ride? They're investing however much they can in terms of time and finances, just no matter where they fall on the wealth scale. It's always like as much as they can, and they're missing the magic. What are they missing? Gem. And so Gemini. I always find that funny to say. 'Cause
Everybody
it's
says
Gemini
that.
and I, or Gem and
I don't know.
I are.
Maybe I should be just a plural. There should be
Well, I don't know if we could handle more
Can't I
than one
define
gem.
as
So
us?
yeah,
Something.
what I discovered was that the programming that I want to bring to people is better co-created, and co-created with Gem and I is just kind of brings the magic. So if we were going to do a weekend clinic and see people Friday evening, Saturday, and briefly Sunday morning, send them on their way. Blessed with a few things. Can you like grab a highlight and maybe give us an in hand you should, or I would like them to know this, and by the end of, and give us a few things you think they should come away with?
Yeah, it's funny. You and I are both from similar backgrounds far long ago, and then went in different directions. For me, the racehorses, my husband rode racehorses. It was a natural progression. I was obsessed with racehorses as a kid, watched the Kentucky Derby, and then to actually be involved in that one day was unbelievable. But I think Pine Valley itself was a factory, so there were a lot of horses through there, mostly young horses, which is definitely my specialty. So I had to find a way to break the most amount of horses in the least amount of time and make them able to go on to their next job, be it racehorse or show horse or whatever, with a foundation so they're not scared. Because I think a lot of the times, even all the lessons I took as a kid, I think back, were the horses happy? I don't know. Do people who own horses and show them, do they not see that some of them sit on the lunge line for 4 hours and are tranquilized and then go in the show ring for a ribbon and they hate it? So I think both Paige and I have taken a step back from top level competition into, now we're evolving into something where we should all be aware that the horse is no longer a piece of machinery that we use to plow a field or to get from A to B, pick up groceries, whatever. It's still something to show off, but it's something that we should respect in a different fashion now and try to make their lives as happy as we can, which doesn't exclude racehorses. For all those who think racing is cruel, I had a definite system for those horses. They were broke as yearlings, which also is sometimes thought of as cruel, but I think it's kinder because you're breaking them. And when I say breaking, they never gallop. I didn't care how big the riders were because they weren't sat on a whole lot. We had a system where we did the long lines. They were introduced to tack in I had a very strict system, which the horses were allowed to, day one, they got a bridle on. Day two, they got a surcingle on. Day three, they got the surcingle on, but in their stall rather than in the pen because it was tricky. Day four, they got a saddle on. So these were guidelines that some horses would fall behind, but I'd start 10 up one week, 10 up the next week. And if someone slid back into to the next group, that was okay, but they had to progress. I had to be strict with them because they were going to be racehorses and they had to perform as you wanted them to. But at the same time, I made it fun. We would go outside some days and just walk around the paddocks. We would spend a couple days teaching them to have a bath once a week. And the long lining was the key, starting them on a set of long lines. And I did it essentially with their racing tack on, with the lines, the stirrups tied underneath and a lunge line through each stirrup. What that did was, because we would have 60 horses, I couldn't ride them all. So I would have, say, 5 riders working, and I would, during the long lining, teaching them to steer, to stop, to do different things, at the same time getting to know them and know which riders would suit them going forward, which rider is going to be the best suited. If there was a big cocky colt, he did need someone a little bit bigger and a little bit stricter. If there's a sensitive little filly, you might pick a quieter rider who's guaranteed to show up every day so they get consistency. So much to think about. But essentially, they had to progress. And there was a start and a finish, and if it took them 3 weeks or 6 weeks, they had to get through it. with exceptions though. Some horses were too big for their age. Some horses were too dumb and you just do a little bit and start them again a month later. But oddly, if we started them in September, October, you'd spend on average 4 to 6 weeks with each horse. And then you start them again in February and they remember it all. They never take a step
Why would
back,
they forget?
ever, without exception.
Why would we think they would? So there's
I always thought they would,
someone
but
that
they
I
didn't.
know that keeps re-drilling the same buttons. Well, before I do that, I'm just going to go out and drill them again and make sure.
Well, the
You know
other
how you
thing-
should.
yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think you should. I don't think your horse
No.
enjoys it, what it's doing for you. And your whole object as an adult amateur is to enjoy your time with that horse. And what you do is so under the thumb that...
So bringing the race horses into it, the difference I find, a lot of the people nowadays, it's all numbers. Races horses are expensive. So for us, we were charging $65 a day. And people would say, can you break them in 3 weeks? And of course, we want those clients. We want those horses to be happy. So we would. And you'd make it work, hoping that they would send them back to start up again and you could continue on where you left off. But at the end of the day, these horses, if you break them well, you can throw a saddle on, you can throw a bridle on, and at the end of the day, they will learn it. You could do it in one day. But if you want that racehorse to, say it's a cheaper racehorse, not a superstar, and it's running for $7,000 or something, and there's 12 horses in that race. When the jockey asks the horse for a little bit more right before the wire, I do find, and I've broken enough to know this and recognizes that the ones that trust you will give you that extra little, I'm just going to stick my nose out front, like they do. Performance horses too, because people forget it's the only sport in the world in every discipline where men and women compete without a handicap to women. And it's possibly because women are maybe more sensitive and understand the horses better, with exceptions, always exceptions. But I think that, I mean, I live now with a bunch of retired horses and they're happy as can be, and their day revolves around what they want to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes me happy and it makes them happy, and they live to like 40 years old and they get buried in my yard. But I still believe in horse racing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you're not, in front of me, you're not in an audience that you need to defend yourself to, but I am trying to moderate a really wildly polarized world. And there is an attack on, the age we start them at. And physically what Jem was describing that their bodies undergo, and the proof they had to have of
There is
x-rays
proof
and whatnot.
that if they don't do exercise at a young age, they will not stand up to racing.
Yeah.
But they
And they
do,
want
they
to
have to
race.
have
They actually want
their
to
knees
race.
have to be closed. They do have restrictive measures to provide that a 2-year-old runs when it's ready, not before. And people don't know that, but there are very strict veterinary rules against that.
So there's a woman who has a podcast all about the welfare in sport and the direction it's taking. And she's got a bunch of letters behind her name and experience in the race world. And she's like, of all of the sports to stand behind, I would stand behind horse racing because I know the horses that do it want to do it.
They do want to do it, and they're regulated.
And they want to win.
And the average life of a crap
Competitive.
racehorse and a good racehorse, they have one groom for 4 horses on average. That horse gets babied, it gets its feet picked out, it gets everything cared for. It's almost cruel when they're done racing and they go and get chucked out in a field and never paid attention to.
Okay, so here's the scenario. The scenario is now this horse that was bred to run, whose instinct has been honed down. Now, every horse has this instinct to run first and ask questions later, but it's been distilled in the thoroughbred because that's what we're looking for. We've just congratulated it, and some adult Amie has said, well, I'm going to give you a second career. And the adult Amie has a little bit of a balance issue and is afraid of speed, and they really like control. So every time that horse offers to go more forward, they say no, and now they have control issues. How can you tell this adult amateur that we love and we want to help get with this thoroughbred? How do we help them through this transition of making that horse comfortable, forward, how to react?
I think with thoroughbreds are different. You always know what they're thinking. They don't plot. They tell you what they think right away, and they're very instinctive.
Instantly,
But I think with that, I think your idea of music is good. I understand what you're talking about. I understand the nervous adult amateur, and even people that I've galloped with. There comes a time where you lose your nerve a bit, but it's repetition in the comfort zone for a thoroughbred. Like you really have to. And I think the groundwork, getting to know a horse. When you were doing the long lining with that student, that was a situation where riding it was not going to be productive that day right away. So now this girl has another skill that she can get to know her pony even more. Or
Yeah.
an adult amateur could do, there's even shows now where you can do line classes with interesting things, walk over a tarp. All this stuff, like
So-
to get to know your horse would definitely
Yeah.
enhance whatever you're going to do with it.
Under one end of the spectrum, one of the common things I see in riding schools is the occasional thoroughbred and the kid, you know, what do we need to work with? We have to work with control, and it's not about, that's not what it's about. At some point, they have to embrace forward, or these horses are going to lose
Well,
their...
thoroughbreds that have run, they are taught to pull against you, which is
Yeah.
what they're definitely taught to do. It's a balance thing, but there's no way that a jockey or a person my size can control a horse if it wants to go. If they want to go fast, I just simply don't weigh enough. I'm not big enough. And bolting is always a fear in a nervous rider. When I was galloping, I couldn't hold a horse if it wanted to go, but I did learn techniques to trick them into it. Singing a song, scratching their neck, distracting them from that initial fear. It's hard to have the
Laughing.
confidence.
Did you
to
laugh
go,
when they jumped
well,
off?
that's the other thing. When we were breaking
a
horses, once
self-defense?
we're on their backs, the yearlings, and we're walking on the track or we're walking outside, if it's a group of 6 and you're all laughing, like, I can see your underwear and you're totally wearing a thong right now, and everybody laughs and the horses go, this is fun, actually. We're just
Yeah.
going for a little, and everybody's having a good time. That works.
Yeah.
Every time that works.
So I've learned the science behind stuff Gemini did by accident.
Yeah,
Gem
that's the
and
thing.
I.
All of our knowledge is accidental.
And by trial and error and lots of failure. And so to save you all a lot of heartache, I know you want to apply what you've learned. There's some things you need to do about horses that want to be forward. And at some point, we want them up and into our hand. We dealt with the other end of the spectrum too, but with these forward horses, I say forward and. So sure, you can go forward and on this size of circle.
Yeah.
You can go forward and up that hill. You can go forward and round. You can go forward and in a rhythm. You can go forward without tilting that wither anywhere. And you want to go more forward? I always am the one that's like, I'm game to go more. Will you go over that footing
Yeah,
like
me
that?
too. I'm
and
too
let
much
them
that
think
way.
about it. Like,
But
let
the
them-
circling is a good idea. The other,
But just so, yeah, you know, use the terrain and what they're likely to do anyway.
the one thing that I can't stress enough is lunging, unless your horse has a tendency to buck, is a terrible idea. I think long lining's different. You can go in different directions, but if your horse is high and you're like, oh, I'll just lunge it first for 15 minutes, then it's got to be 20 minutes, then it's got to be half an hour. Now you got a really fit horse and you're in trouble if they do decide to do something.
Yeah,
So
it's very hard
it's
on their
always better
joints.
to go back to the basics and
Yeah.
do some groundwork, or even long line at the walk and make it interesting. Put the horse over poles. Give them something else to think about. Like you, Paige, when I watched you substitute those lessons, some of the ponies were tired or sore, and so Paige made it fun. She put some poles in between the paddocks, places the horses hadn't been before, and suddenly they forgot they're a little stiff and they just want to do it. And the kids are laughing and everybody's having fun. She gives them a choice. Pick whatever jumps you're comfortable jumping, pick a course and do it and be confident about it. And I could see the kids' eyes light up and the ponies' eyes light up and everything.
Yeah. So we're
It's about stepping
heavily-
outside the box, but still
Yeah.
having the general parameters.
heavily invested in kind of reinvigorating the horse industry that we grew up in,
And that
you
we
know, and
still
finding
love.
the best in it.
We're both
and
at
then-
this age now, we don't want horses out of our lives.
Yeah. So I nerded out on the science of why your humming and singing works, and we can teach a bit of that. So some of the stuff we would do would be a little bit in class, then there would be exercises between humans, and then exercises loose between horses. Gemini would do a lot of the in-hand stuff because it solves another end of the spectrum too. So if you've got a horse that wants to be forward and you need to find an outlet, keep it serpentining while you're long lining it and make going forward something that becomes something it needs to balance.
No, but also horses
it
are
in a
very
rhythm.
reward driven too. Like
Yeah, make it
if
fun.
you're having trouble with something and you put them on a long line and suddenly you can do something very simply and reward them with it, it boosts their confidence
Yeah.
too. It's like any child or athlete.
And there's that bank account we were
The
talking
bank
about
account.
filling
The
up.
bank account for thoroughbreds, when I galloped for 25 years, I would not let a horse graze on the way home unless it had money in the bank, unless it had finished in the money and had a bank account, and then it was allowed. And but the bank account doesn't have to be money. It can also be reward them for doing, like when you were doing the long lining, and that girl, she picked it up really well. And our methods were different. Mine, just because it was the masses, I let the reins drop because if you step on them, you just pick up your foot. They don't get tangled if you're going forward. As you learn to do that, you learn to manage your reins better. But doing that kind of thing, that little girl, she was successful and happy, but she still wanted to ride because she's a kid and she still wants to
Yeah,
ride her
can I
pony.
ride
So
now?
you
Can
gave
I
her
ride
that
now?
option, and that's a reward
Bareback.
for both of them.
And if the horse bought into it. So the whole thing was, well, from here on in, he's done his work for the day. So it's an investment in him. So if you can prove that he'll let you on him and he'll stand there quietly grazing with you on him, then yes. And he couldn't understand the rules of that game. He was expecting something else and
Yeah.
just wouldn't settle. So she got off. And hand grazed and brought him in. And I'm trying to teach them not to be emotional about that. They start saying, he doesn't like me. You know
Yeah.
what? He has an opinion about what you've been doing. And what I said past me would have done is say, oh, did you see what he did there? That's disrespectful. Smack him for it. And while Jem and I have both discussed when it is appropriate to hold your boundaries come hell or high water with whatever you need to, this idea now of going, whoa, they just told me something they thought a moment ago. How can I change that or show them that I've recognized it, is something that these kids are dealing with. And it makes them feel,
It's the recognition. Yeah.
oh, I've been pushing them through this and telling them they're bad. And I'm like, yeah, well, we raised children like that too. I told
Yeah.
my kids, and my husband would say, well, that's rude.
You want to
should
cry? I'll
pretend
give you
to
something
like
to cry
this.
about. Yeah.
You know, a good kid would pretend to like this. So the discussion has been about some kids where they're applying all the correct aids, and yet they need to escalate somehow to a crop to get to the horse to be forward enough. So on the other end of the spectrum, not the thoroughbreds, the average riding schoolie who's like, oh my God, this kid's here again. I have to do another riding lesson. We're trying to give them the responsibility for that horse not feeling like that.
They also, though, you
It's
have
a
to realize too that they're
good
spending a lot
experience.
of money on a lesson. They're only once a week. They really just want to ride the snot out of it. And I
Yeah.
get that too. But it's different with the kids that own. Like, I think that girl owns her pony, doesn't she?
Yeah, so she's there more days a week.
She
has
might take that
practice sessions
separately and do it on her own. And then whatever she wanted to ride, she wanted to do that. But she's going to think about it now. You've given her something to think about and to respect her pony a bit more.
I've given the responsibility to the parents and the students there of the horses showing up excited about their work. And I've tried to teach them what I've learned in clicker training, which is the moment that they start thinking of what you want them to do rewarding and marking it. And when you translate it onto their backs with pressure and release, I use the word yes at that moment. And what that looks like. And they haven't quite got it yet. I need to do a demonstration. And it sounds a lot probably like something more interesting going on if you only heard it from the outside.
Yeah,
It's a lot of yes, yes, yes.
No, they do get to know. But they also, back to briefly, tangent, that's what we're about.
Yes.
The thoroughbreds with the yearlings, everyone thinks it's cruel. We never spend more than 15 minutes on a yearling. And if I have a day where 2 riders don't show up, so I'm on my own for 20 horses, even I will just throw the tack on them in the stall and kick them around a stall, just like 3 minutes, so that the next day they go, hey, that wasn't so bad, and they meet you at the door. That's encouraging horses to be good race horses, but at the same time, the discipline with them, you early on get to recognize which are going to be the star pupils and which aren't, and you do put pressure on the star pupils.
But your litmus test was, are they looking forward to me coming to meet them at the door? How do I
when
make
they
this
would
fun?
turn their bum to the door and hard to catch, I always change something. I wouldn't give them a day off, though. They can't have a day off, like, unless they're injured or sick. We took temperatures a lot. But, I mean, you do have to keep it fun at an early age, and then the horses will look forward to it.
Yeah. And so that is the responsibility of everyone that throws a leg over them. And remember having it drilled home to me that every time that horse jumped something, it was one less in the tank that it had. But it goes to stand like every trotting pole it does too, because we watch them. Our good friends keep their horses in it. Horses like to have jobs. They like to contribute to society, and they keep them limber and doing something right to the end. So be mindful if you're a beginner at a lesson barn that you can change that horse's experience in how you carry your body and how you react to it, and do a lot of things on the ground to carry yourself better on the horses. So these kids, I was trying to give them the idea of how to stay off their backs on mounting and hold themselves with one knee in the tack till they get the other stirrup, like the animals.
That's a given with racehorses.
Yeah. And to do all kinds of things I did by accident because I could only ride down the roads. So when I went down the roads, I picked ones I could tie up the reins, and I went no hands, hands on head, hands behind back, double up to down the waltz, and all these exercises. So I give them a bunch of things they can do before they even see Lauren, and then get a 20-minute lesson. So it crosses over into, that's really the only amount of time we need at any level.
It's hard for anyone to pay attention for an hour, and the
Yeah.
horses are bored and they can't keep it up at that level for an hour. Like I said
No.
with the babies, we
Our
do 5 minutes.
expectations are wrong. And so I've kind of shifted their expectations to something. We used to do it with my dressage coach, Edwina Hugenholtz. Everyone should have a dressage coach with that name. And
I like it.
we had 20-minute lessons. And you showed up ready to ride, ready to rock and roll and play, and you cooled out. And
You get much more
often
from
we
it.
got off immediately. She'd go, perfect, get off. Loosen his girth, loosen his noseband, Paige, and rub those cheeks, yes, and let him roll. You know. So we're trying to instill all of these things, and all the things we did by accident with a bit of knowledge of how horses communicate, practice with our own body language, practice with the long lines. One thing that I thought was really useful for these horses that don't want to go forward is you can't drive them until you get them motivated, because they've got to be up into your hand. And I wasn't taught to long line, but I was always getting them ready for the sulky. My dad was a standardbred trainer.
It's all about where you are in relation to them,
Up
and
into the-
understanding what I always said, they can see behind them much
Well,
better than in front.
and
So
then,
you've got to always stay on a flank depending on your...
yeah. One
And
of the-
never, ever, ever get in their kicking zone, ever.
Yes, so we got her in and out of the kicking zone because she trusts that horse so much she thinks he won't, right? Well, that's the one that when he's scared, he will. And there's the opportune moment. Yeah, stay out of the kick zone. You're better either next to them because they'll just push you, or well out of it, but give them a bit of a snap to that hoof and like, see you later.
Well, we're both
Yeah.
products of that, so...
Yeah, wildly cognizant of it. So we can teach together some safe in-hand skills, and then I'm going to bring some of the heart math and breathing skills that we were doing by accident to people so they can consciously use tools that measure things with lights, which is always fun and quantifies it, and none of us can fake, to the mounted work as well, and have a feel clinic. One thing that the kids said that they need to see embodied, and I think it's the kids that are the most disciplined that show up with everything tucked in and are like, yes, thank you, Paige, and whatever you think, Paige, are the ones who go, I don't understand, make my energy match my intentions and aids. What do you mean by bring my energy up? And that can kind of only be
That's when
demonstrated.
you play share and crank up the music.
Yeah. Okay.
Jump
So
in
we're
the
going to have
pool.
music. We're going to encourage people to bring some of their own playlists too that they think matches or would motivate their horses or settle them or whatever they feel they want to kind of create a vibe on with their horses and have something really special. So we're going to go cook up this recipe of deliciousness and bring it to you all. Yeah, thanks for listening to some of our storytelling and look forward to more Gemini Kane.
We toned it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the lovely and talented Gemini Kane.
Yeah, I often thought about a hyphenated name, but Gemini's just too much.
Well, thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed catching up with Gemini and I, and this lightness that came from such a heavy beginning. Do you feel the difference between the beginning of this podcast and the end of it? There's some lightness here now that there wasn't earlier, isn't there? And there's a message for all of you going through the unimaginable. You know, it always gets better. It never lasts. It's phenomenal what you can live through. And in some ways, you know, I think it's important for Gemini and I to not want to go back and change what we can't change, because that would be taking something away from the people that we love, the people that we want to spare the hurt from. But Mike is living the life of a superhero, and so is Miles in so many ways. They wouldn't be these extraordinary people that we know and love, and Gemini wouldn't have learned what we've learned, and we wouldn't have come to the places where we are now. And who would take that away from them? Who knows what they would have been or what would have happened without those extraordinary tests. And we have to remember that those souls, those two souls, chose to stay. They worked hard to stay, and not just for us, although we may have been the anchors who kept them here initially. They stayed because they have so much love to give, and they have so much to give the world, and Gemini have found a lightness in our being and a purpose to our being and a way of spreading love. And we're starting with the world we know, with the horse world, and changing it in ways that we can, passing on really hard-won knowledge, so hopefully other lives will be easier. But I want you to know that if your lives aren't feeling easy right now, that you can find joy in the shitstorm, and things can always get better. Whether it's in your life, with your human loved ones, or your horses. And we look forward to seeing these new ways that we can help you learn to work magic with your horses and with your lives. And we'll probably show up wearing tiaras and playing some music and bringing the fun. Because if Gemini and I are together, then definitely there's going to be music and fun and laughter and horses. So thank you all so much for listening and for being here. And remember, really, truly, anything is possible together.
See, that's what we're doing, Paige. Going for the daydream.
Hey, you're still here. Thanks so much for listening. What you think and feel matters. If this resonated with you, please like and share. It truly makes a difference. I encourage you to engage with the content on my Substack account and my socials, all at The Magic of Horsecraft, where you can join the discussion and shape the future shows. Tell me what you want to hear more of or less of, and we'll evolve together as we grow a community of like-minded souls here for the good of the horse. If you're an adult amateur horse lover looking for confidence and clarity in your role of equine steward, check out my course, From Amateur to Magician, Making Magic with Horses, at themagicofhorsecraft.com. Until then, I'm here to remind you of a couple things. One, underneath it all, we all want the same things, to be heard, understood, and accepted for who we are. And two, anything is possible. Take a chance.